Would you like to be able to grow lots of great tasting tomatoes even in small spaces? In this video, I'm going to give you 6 tips to help you do just that. Nothing says summer better than biting into a nice, sweet, juicy, vine-ripened tomato. They're great eaten fresh by themselves or in a salad, or cooked into a rich, flavorful sauce or paste. I tell you, it's really hard to beat being able to grow your own tomatoes. For those of you who are new to this channel, my name is Linda and I'd like to welcome you to Veggy 360. But before we get started, hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on any future videos. For growing great tomatoes, you want to make sure you plant in the right place. For maximum yield, tomato plants need at least 6 to 8 hours of direct sun each day. Now they can get by with less sun, but they're going to be scraggly, scrawny. The yields are going to be lower. Now, cherry tomatoes can get by with slightly less sun, but for your slicers, the beefsteak type, the more sun the better. So reserve the sunny spots in your garden for those types of tomatoes. Avoid planting in the same place each year. This is because tomatoes are particularly susceptible to soil-borne diseases. So it's a good idea to rotate each year. Now in small gardens that's not always possible. So in this situation, you want to make sure that you are practicing good disease control measures. Tomatoes are also heavy feeders, so you need to replenish the nutrients in the soil. Now, my beds are filled with Mel's mix, which is 1/3 compost. The compost will break down over time as the plants absorb the nutrients. So throughout the year, I'm adding at least 3 inches of compost just to replenish the nutrients. Alternatively, you could use a balanced fertilizer at planting time just to make sure your plants get off to a great start. But then you're also going to want to fertilize again right before the fruiting stage or the flowering stage using a high phosphorus fertilizer. The high phosphorus level will help support better roots and fruit production. You want to plant using the right spacing. What is the right spacing? Well, that depends on several factors, one of which is the type of tomato that you're planting. Determinants tend to have a more compact growth habit. As the name implies, it's going to grow to a predetermined size, produce most of its fruit in a relatively short amount of time, and then it's done. You just pull it up. Indeterminates, however, continue to grow until they're killed off by first frost. Now these plants, they produce tomatoes throughout the whole growing season. Dwarf tomatoes stay compact like the determinate tomatoes, but they continue to fruit throughout the whole growing season like the indeterminates. They continue to grow, but at a much slower rate compared to the indeterminates. A good rule of thumb when determining how close to plant your tomatoes, the bushier they are, the further apart you want to plant. Determinants and dwarf tomatoes grown in cages, and I mean the sturdy cages, not the flimsy type of tomato cages. These plants can be grown 24 inches apart in a raised bed. If you're planting in ground though, you're going to want 3 feet between rows just so that you can walk between rows. Carefully pruned, and this is a key phrase here, carefully pruned and either staked or trellis indeterminate tomatoes can be planted closer at 18 to 24 inches apart. If you're using the square foot gardening method though, you can do 1 tomato per square foot. When I'm planting in our garden, I'm using the square foot gardening spacing, growing up on its tomato trellis. To do this, we bent a cattle panel into an arch shape and secured it with 4 T-posts. I then planted 5 tomatoes on each side at 1-foot intervals and then allowed them to climb up the trellis, forming a beautiful tomato tunnel. Another option is to turn the cattle panel on its side and hang it about 1 foot up off the ground
securing it to posts with zip ties, and then plant the tomatoes at the base. These tomatoes are in ground, so they're planted about 18 to 24 inches apart and then carefully tied up to grow up the trellis.
Bottom line, you can grow a lot of tomatoes in a small space using the proper supports to grow up, not out. You also want to plant at the right depth. Tomatoes are interesting in that roots can grow on any portion of the stem that is buried because they have adventitious roots. More roots means more nutrient uptake, which means a healthier, more productive plant. There's two approaches that you can take to having a larger root area on your tomato plants. If you live in a hot, drier climate, then it's best to go deep. The soil is much cooler and more moist the further down you go. So in this situation, plant the roots deeply.
Remove the lower leaves, leaving about 2 to 3 sets of leaves up at the top. You'll see you have a larger portion of the stem now that you can bury, and all of this area will grow roots to better support the plant and provide more nutrient uptake. Dig a hole deep enough to accommodate the roots in any portion of the stem that you'd like to bury so that the lower leaves are at least 2 to 3 inches above the soil surface. Gently place the tomato in place, backfill with the soil, water thoroughly, and place a label on your plant so that you know what variety you've planted.
In cooler climates where the soil is a little bit slower to warm up in the spring, it's best to plant more shallow.
To plant more shallow, dig a trough at about a 45-degree angle. This will allow you to plant the tomato on its side so that the roots are closer to the soil surface where the temperatures are much warmer. Dig the trench long enough to accommodate the roots and any portion of the stem that you would like to bury. Once you have the trench long enough, you can tip the plant out carefully, gently place it in the trough, and then backfill to within 2 to 3 inches of the lower leaves. You'll see that the plant is on its side, but because it's phototropic, it will actually reach for the sun and within 24 hours be going straight up.
Prune properly to minimize exposure to soil-borne diseases and provide better air circulation, which will reduce your chances of diseases like early blight or powdery mildew. You want to remove any of the lower leaves that touch the ground and any leaf that is below the first fruit set. These leaves are not needed, and there's plenty of other leaves on the plant for photosynthesis. You also want to remove any diseased leaves as they develop. Make sure though that you sterilize your pruning shears with something like an alcohol spray in order to keep from spreading the diseases from plant to plant. I have included a video link in the description below in case you do end up with any plant diseases. In this video I explain how you can save your plants or basically bring them back to life. Check out this video. For indeterminate plants, because they do continue to grow throughout the whole growing season, they are going to get quite large. They also have a tendency to produce a lot of suckers.
Suckers are side shoots that grow at the base of the leaf where it meets the stem. It's best to control the growth of the plant by removing these suckers while they're still small. That way you can keep the growth habit more neat. When the suckers are very small, they can easily be pinched out.
So to help control the plant growth, prune off the suckers, leaving either a single stem, or you can let one of the main suckers go and produce a second stem, so you have a double stem. When you prune off the suckers, you are eliminating potential fruit production, so going with a double stem will actually double your yields compared to a single stem. For determinants and dwarfs, they stay much more compact, and determinants in particular are only going to produce fruit for a set period of time. So anytime you prune off a sucker from a determinate tomato, you are eliminating quite a bit of fruit production. So for determinants and dwarfs, don't remove the suckers. For dwarf tomatoes, they tend to produce more leaves for their size compared to the indeterminates and determinants. So it's a good idea to go in and remove any of the excess leaves from the center of the plant so that you promote better airflow. Apply 1 to 2 inch layer of mulch, and you have different options for mulching. My favorite is a hardwood mulch. You can also use dried grass clippings, but make sure that your grass has not been treated with a pre-emergent or an herbicide, because that will lead to trouble. You can use straw or dried leaves as well. All of these are great options because as they break down, they will provide rich organic matter for the plants. Mulching the tomatoes is important for disease control because it prevents the spores of the soil-borne fungi from splashing up onto the lower leaves. It also helps maintain a more uniform moisture content in the soil, which is important for minimizing your chances of blossom end rot. We'll go more into that in another video, but for now, just remember, uniform soil moisture content is key. It also is great for weed control, for those of us who hate to weed the gardens. So mulch, it helps. You want to water properly. Water from below, not overhead. You want to water at the ground level in order to avoid getting the foliage wet. Excessively wet foliage will lead to fungal diseases and powder mildew. My favorite way of watering is drip irrigation because it's easiest, in particular because I have a timer. It also uses less water because it waters more gradually. There's going to be less water runoff. So in order to grow great tomatoes, plant at the right location, using the right spacing, plant at the right depth, prune properly, use mulch, and water properly. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Please help me grow more gardeners by sharing this video with your friends who love to garden. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye now.